I'm Adrian, and today we're taking an in-depth look at Solid Snake's fighting style in the Metal Gear Solid video game series. Solid Snake is a legendary mercenary who has saved the world multiple times and is part of an extraordinarily complex storyline that spans decades and is a very skilled fighter. I've already analyzed this awesome fight scene with Liquid Ocelot and have also dedicated countless videos on my channel to the Metal Gear Solid series, from a live-action short where Metal Gear Rex makes an appearance, to short parody videos featuring Samus Aran and Princess Zelda, to straight-up reviews and gameplay videos as well. All of these are available on the Metal Gear playlist in the description below. And now it's time to get into some pretty specific minutiae about Solid Snake and his background in order to avoid any potential confusion. I'm going to be getting into spoiler territory here, just so you know. Solid Snake is one of the clones of Big Boss, an extremely talented soldier and agent who has also saved the world from nuclear catastrophe multiple times as well. Big Boss trained Solid Snake while he was part of an elite military unit known as Foxhound. This included him teaching Snake his extremely advanced form of hand-to-hand fighting that he developed with the Boss, yet another formidable and legendary soldier, known as Close Quarters Combat, or CQC for short. Solid Snake never really showed any indications of knowing this system until Metal Gear Solid 4, and clarifies to Otacon that he just never felt right using any of it, since in Snake's point of view,
never felt right using a technique learned from a man who betrayed his unit.
As he states himself. We now know that anything Big Boss can do, Solid Snake can do as well, since he was trained by Big Boss. So if I show footage of Big Boss, or as he was formerly known, Naked Snake, performing a technique, this is something Solid Snake is also capable of doing. In Metal Gear Solid 5, they introduce a concept that Big Boss is actually not one person, but comprised of two people. This would be the boss's medic turned legendary soldier, Venom Snake. This medic underwent extreme facial reconstruction and hypnosis and awoke looking and thinking that he was a real Big Boss. In other words, he knew every skill and technique that Big Boss knew and was capable of performing it just as well. So if he can do the technique, that means Big Boss can do the technique. And since we already established that Solid Snake can do anything that Big Boss could do, Solid Snake can therefore do anything Venom Snake can do. So when I show footage of Metal Gear Solid 5, these are things Solid Snake is capable of performing. To further drive this point home, I installed a mod that makes Venom Snake look like Solid Snake. Lastly, I felt analyzing Solid Snake made the most sense since he's the one who defeated Big Boss and Venom Snake. The goal of these videos is to figure out just how many fighting styles our combatant is familiar with by analyzing the specific moves featured in their fight scenes and gameplay, and pairing them with the martial art or fighting style which most aptly represents those moves. To clarify, there's obviously a ton of crossover in martial art techniques, since a technique that is present in one fighting style may also be present in another. This analysis focuses on what has been seen of Snake in the Metal Gear Solid series. In other words, what has been shown in Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, Metal Gear Solid The Twin Snakes, Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, and Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain. Fighting styles that Solid Snake may know in any crossover games, such as the upcoming Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, do not count. Without further ado, let's take a look at how many fighting styles Solid Snake knows. We begin by diving headfirst into the aforementioned Close Quarters Combat, or CQC. What exactly is it? Is it real? Is it made up? According to a 2004 interview with Motosada Mori, the military advisor of the series, CQC is, quote, used in the jungle, bushes, and indoors when you cannot use a gun. The technique has been developed for when you have to fight multiple enemies that are very close to you, or when you don't know from where you will be attacked. It is a total combat technique used when you're close to enemies and you have to be able to fight with your bare hands, knife, and gun accordingly. He goes on to clarify that he learned many of these techniques when he was a SWAT instructor several years ago. When pressed to say which military units actually use this technique, he stated that he cannot reveal any actual organization names. However, delving upon further research and analysis, you realize that the particular CQC he is talking about, that is, the one you use in the games, is not a real thing, but an extremely convincing fighting style designed by Motosada Mori that incorporates so many real-world techniques to make it look extremely convincing. And that's a big part of what this video will be examining and analyzing. I'd like to note that Motosada Mori did not lie in this interview, as he did not say his particular system was real at any point. He only described its characteristics, and he didn't reveal any organizations that used it, so he said no falsehoods. To further elaborate on this, in reality the term CQC is a tactical concept that involves physical confrontation between several combatants, usually consisting of small units engaging the enemy with personal weapons at a short range. So to think of it in terms of a real-world scenario, every country has their own CQC system. The United States trains their soldiers through the Marine Corps martial arts program. The Russians study Sistema, which you can learn about in my Winter Soldier Fighting Styles video. So in other words, Motosada Mori's CQC is basically an amalgamation of martial arts he has been exposed to or been familiar with throughout his life. So to clarify, I will not list CQC as a fighting style for Snake because this series is intended in finding out the real world fighting styles a character knows, not the fictitious ones. It's the same reason why I didn't list the Way of the Spider as a fighting style for my Spider-Man videos. It isn't real, and therefore it's disqualified from being in this series. So if Snake's CQC is comprised of several fighting styles, which are they? Probably the best thing to start with would be what he's most known for, a chokehold. It has been a series staple since the very early days of Metal Gear Solid, and the technique to execute this chokehold has changed considerably depending on the game that you're talking about. In its most basic sense, this hold prevents air or blood from passing through the neck of an opponent. The first time we got a good look at this chokehold was in Metal Gear Solid 2. Notice how if Snake yanks the soldier enough times, he cracks his neck? Or when he tightens the hold he wants him to pass out? This makes all the difference in the world. When the soldier passes out, what Snake is doing is called a blood choke in Judo and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, also known as Jujutsu. They prefer to use the term strangleholds if you're preventing blood from passing through, and call it an air choke if you're preventing air from passing through. So to be hyper-specific, he's executing a rear naked choke, which is a type of blood choke. You accomplish it exactly the way he's portraying it by wrapping one of your arms around the neck of the person and then grabbing your own bicep. This results in pressure being applied to the neck on both sides, causing unconsciousness. Blood chokes are the most effective in producing unconsciousness, which is why Snake is such a fan of using them. Once we're in Metal Gear Solid 3 territory, Snake prefers to use a knife for most of the intimidation in the choke. Even though this choke is looser than the rear naked choke, the soldier's throat is right on the knife's blade, so he knows that any sudden movement could result in him getting slashed or stabbed. Same goes for his choke in Metal Gear Solid 4. It's a variant of 3 since he still holds his knife, but he also uses his forearm to apply pressure. In Metal Gear Solid 5, the chokehold changes dramatically. The first hold is a precursor hold, so to speak, used more to let the guard know that he's restrained and can get stabbed if he doesn't cooperate in yielding information. The second part of this hold changes into what is known as a kata hajime in Judo and Jujutsu, or a single wing strangle. The goal of this hold is to exert pressure on the carotid arteries, but there's also some pressure being applied to the windpipe, which does make it a dangerous technique to practice. Briefly exploring his skill with the knife, Snake is more than capable of turning that threat of a stab into an actual slash or stab. We will return to the knife later on. Moving on from Snake's chokeholds, he also has a huge array of excellent and effective throwing techniques that are designed to incapacitate his opponent in one way or another, either by temporarily stunning them or downright knocking them out. As with the chokehold, many of these techniques come from Judo and Jujutsu, and in certain cases Aikido as well. All three are Japanese martial arts, and extremely appropriate given that Motosada Mori is Japanese, and he is most likely very familiar with these styles and wished to apply them to Snake. In Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2, we see a throw that is found in multiple martial arts, but among them is once again Jujutsu and Judo. It's called a Sasai Suri Komiyashi, and it's classified as a foot technique. What it boils down to is using your hands and foot to guide your opponent to the floor. Snake gets plenty of mileage with this throw, as it's perfect to both execute on unsuspecting enemies and to get out of a jam when you're overwhelmed by soldiers, as you can throw them against each other. Once we get to Metal Gear Solid 3, we see his throwing techniques increase tenfold. He's now able to direct where he's pushing his opponent. Snake can even throw his opponent to the ground, incapacitating him immediately. However, it's during the cutscenes where we really see Snake display a wealth of techniques never seen before. Who could forget Snake mowing down Ocelot's small army one by one, or his fight with him later on? As you may have guessed, once again practically all of these techniques come from Jujutsu. For example, this hip throw is known as a Ushiro Guruma. This one is known as an Osoto Otoshi. It also appears in Metal Gear Solid 5. Similar to the previous throw we examined, it's also a foot technique, and here you're basically causing your opponent to fall backwards by pushing him with your arm and pulling him with your foot. There are plenty of other techniques throughout the games, with some being not exactly very realistic, but spectacular to look at. As a matter of fact, the grand majority of all of Snake's throwing techniques in the multiple entries in Metal Gear Solid hail from Jujutsu, Aikido, and Judo. Jujutsu is the art which led to Judo, which in turn led to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The central tenet of Judo is maximum efficiency with minimum effort, and I believe that seeing Snake in action really illustrates that concept perfectly. He barely moves a muscle and his opponents end up on the ground in no time flat. If you're enjoying this video so far, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and consider donating to my Patreon. As little as $1 helps me out tremendously in being able to make more videos for you guys. If you donate, you'll also get really cool rewards as well, such as finding out which are my upcoming videos and getting your name in the credits. Before we venture into disarming techniques, let's go through all the various striking techniques that appear throughout the Metal Gear saga. We will begin with Snake's various kicks, as he is shown to favor them quite a bit when throwing isn't an option. In Metal Gear Solid, Snake kept things extremely simple. After his 2 punches, he launched a roundhouse kick. It's an extremely popular kick present in several martial arts, and one of those is Taekwondo, a Korean martial art which came from the Japanese martial art Karate. Taekwondo decided to expand its focus on kicking. The roundhouse kick is accomplished by lifting your knee, slightly pivoting your back leg, and extending your lifted leg in a semicircular motion. The great thing about the roundhouse kick is that it can be endlessly repurposed to fit the particular situation at hand. Sometimes it will swing all the way through, sometimes it won't, sometimes it's to the gut, sometimes it targets the legs or the head. Although the target may change, it's still a roundhouse kick at its core. Snake also has a variation of his punch-punch-kick combo. In this instance, he performs one of my personal favorite kicks in Taekwondo, the jump spin hook kick. You execute the kick by jumping and twisting in the air, and then using your momentum, swing your leg out in a hook-like motion, striking with the bottom of your foot. As a matter of fact, I incorporated this very same technique in my live-action short, Solid Snake vs. Sam Fisher, to reference this very move in the game. It was plenty of fun to do, and I highly encourage you to watch the short if you haven't yet. The link is available in the description below. In the Twin Snakes, during his battle with Cyborg Ninja, Snake executes a side kick. But in this case, the kick is immediately deflected by Ninja before he's able to complete it. The reason we could tell it was going to be a side kick is by looking at how he tucked in the leg and the trajectory before it was deflected. He then transitions into a low roundhouse kick, followed by a spinning hook kick, followed by a roundhouse kick that really connects on the gut. Metal Gear Solid 4 really is a tour de force of Taekwondo kicking techniques, with high and low roundhouses, a jump roundhouse, spinning hook kick, front kick, side kick, and a spinning side kick. We can thus safely say that Snake is familiar with Taekwondo due to the complexity of the kicking techniques that is not present in other fighting styles. A good rule of thumb when judging kicks is that as soon as you start spinning and or jumping to execute them, you've probably gone into Taekwondo territory. In the Phantom Pain, we're treated to an extremely practical use to the kicks seen in Taekwondo. Sometimes you don't want to kick that high. For example, this side kick is not directed at the body, but at the legs. Low roundhouse kicks are seen throughout the series, usually at the tail end of Snake's default 3-strike combo. He also uses a sweep kick in order to knock enemies down that are next to him if he happens to be on the floor. However, the kick that I once again was seriously not expecting to see was the famous push kick! Yes, the push kick. In Snake's case, he opts to use it whenever he's close to a barrier, as this way the enemy will be completely immobilized. If not by the force of the kick, the slam against the barrier will do. For full explanation on the push kick and how it differs from the front kick, please refer to my Thanos How Many Fighting Styles video. But sometimes you don't have that much room to extend your leg for a full kick, and that's when you turn to Muay Thai's devastating knees. Snake is a fan of using these techniques, dating all the way back to his adventures in Shadow Moses, as he demonstrates with Cyborg Ninja. It doesn't show up again until Metal Gear Solid 4. His knee strike is stuff of legends, capable of catapulting his enemies several feet. Furthermore, Snake demonstrates excellent use of his elbows during his close quarters fight with Ocelot, landing them every chance he gets. Further indication of his training in Muay Thai is displayed at how he blocks Ocelot's relentless attacks. Notice how he puts his arms up in order to shield himself, with his arms very close to his body and head. This is exactly how you're taught to block in Muay Thai. The block is also seen in boxing, as a matter of fact. They just lower their guard a bit to protect themselves from shots to the gut, which is, curiously enough, the weakness that Ocelot immediately exploits. A really interesting but super risky block is the one he executes right here. The gist of the block is using your elbow to block the punch. It requires pinpoint accuracy, and if you miss it, you will probably take a punch to the face. And like many other fighters in this series, Snake is great at throwing a good old punch. This dates all the way back to Metal Gear 1 and 2. In a similar manner to many other fighters, he varies his technique as well. Sometimes he demonstrates proper karate and taekwondo form, where when you launch your punch with one hand, the other recoils and pulls back beside the waist, ready for the next punch. He further executes a karate technique known as the spinning back fist. It's actually quite prevalent in UFC tournaments and is capable of inflicting massive damage due to the torque. He also uses the famous knife hand strike, as well as the ridge hand strike. Sometimes he punches and goes for boxing form. He also executes traditional boxing uppercuts as well. Boxing form can always be detected by where you place your other arm in the punch. In boxing, you always want to keep your head protected to avoid any sucker punches, so this is why your other hand should be left right by your cheek. An important point to note is how Snake is also familiar with doing palm strikes. Notice how he keeps his palms open when he attacks in Metal Gear Solid 4. He also keeps his hands slightly open in other games in the series. Notice how here you can clearly see the palm strike. The bottom ridge of the palm is a very solid striking area and can do plenty of damage if done properly, with less risk of injury to the striker's hand compared to a closed fist punch. Furthermore, it's doubly useful to someone like Snake because he can immediately transition into a disarm if need be. This is because your hands are already open and can easily grab or deflect something that is coming at them. Palm strikes are seen in several martial arts including karate, taekwondo, and kali. As a matter of fact, kali commonly refers to all its hand-to-hand techniques as open hand or empty hand. This brings us to Kali, also known as Arnis or Eskrima, the versatile and effective art from the Philippines. It has a huge variety of open-handed attacks, but where it really shines is with its weapons and excellent disarms. One of the most prevalent weapons seen in this art is how to use a knife properly, and Snake is one of those practitioners. He can easily wield it and do proper slashing and striking forms, as well as use these forms to attack. I learned this very same knife form in Krav Maga class, and my instructor let me know that it hailed directly from Kali. Furthermore, it works in tandem really well with the various knife disarms seen in the series, as well as the various weapon disarms. The weapon disarms are a combination of Kali techniques, along with Jujutsu and Aikido techniques. The goal is to execute them quickly and with the least possible movement necessary, as any time wasted could result in getting shot. Also note how Snake will always shift himself away from the gun barrel. This particular disarm is known as the Kote Gaeshi, and it's an excellent joint lock that puts extreme pressure in your wrist that is taught in several fighting styles, including Jujutsu and Aikido. Putting all of this together, now you can see and detect how all these skills complement and play off each other during his barrage of strikes in the Phantom Pain. But all of this doesn't cover what Snake does when he isn't getting shot at or being attacked, and that is staying hidden and striking the enemy when he least expects it, only to disappear moments later to hopefully never be seen again. And for that, we turn to yet another Japanese martial art, the art of ninjutsu. Ninjutsu is actually an umbrella term martial art, meaning that it comprises a host of styles. According to Bujinkan members, the 18 disciplines that comprise ninjutsu were first stated in the scrolls of Daga Kureyu and became definitive for all ninjutsu schools. And those 18 skills actually form their very own set of umbrellas. I know, it gets a little overwhelming when you think about it. In any case, which of these skills does Snake demonstrate? We will start with Taijutsu, a Japanese blanket term for unarmed combat. It literally means body technique or body skill. Considering Snake employs a plethora of punches, kicks, and throws, it's a no-brainer that he's skilled in this area. We also have Inton Jutsu, which refers to the art of escaping and concealment. Inton Jutsu also goes hand in hand with Kyaku Jutsu, which literally means the art of gunpowder. Besides meaning that Snake is capable of using firearms, it's more along the lines of using it in a pyrotechnical way, using materials that are capable of undergoing self-contained exothermical chemical reactions for the production of, among other things, gas. Snake will frequently throw gas grenades to disorient his enemies and go in for the attack. We also have Shinobi Iri, which literally means the art of stealth and infiltration. Every single time Snake is using stealth to progress in the game is Shinobi Iri, whether he's quietly sneaking by unsuspecting enemies, or crawling on the ground, or simply taking people out without being noticed at all. That is the art of stealth. That is Shinobi Iri. Now you know why certain ninja games are called shinobi. Within ninjutsu's umbrella, we find Boryaku, which is, put simply, the use of unorthodox strategies and tactics. And Snake is quite experienced in doing this, whether it be something as simple as hiding in a box, to switching controller ports, or creating a makeshift flamethrower with lacquer spray. Snake will always find a way to complete his mission. Next up is Chimon, or using geography to your advantage. Whether it be hiding in the grass, up in a tree, or even in plain sight with advanced octo-camo technology, Snake makes good use of his environment. Furthermore, as seen in Metal Gear Solid and Metal Gear Solid 5, a big point is made to scoping out the territory you're about to infiltrate before barging in. In other words, studying your geography as well. Choho is a pretty big one, as this literally means the art of espionage. As a matter of fact, it's right in the tagline in most of the games of the series as tactical espionage action. In the games, you are consistently tasked with obtaining confidential information without permission of the holder of the information. So in other words, you are spying. So whether it's infiltrating Shadow Moses to find out what the terrorists' plans are, to taking pictures of a secret Metal Gear in development, to simply scanning files in enemy territory, Snake is consistently spying in the Metal Gear series. Kenjutsu comprises a host of sword techniques, and although Snake does state he's not a fan of blades, that doesn't mean he isn't capable of using them. As a matter of fact, take a look at these excellent disarms. If you know how to disarm a sword and immediately counterattack with it, you know how to use a sword. And I know that the Acid series is in no way part of the main timeline, but in Metal Gear Acid, Solid Snake is shown to use the sword as well. In other words, the skill is still there and acknowledged by the developers. Hanso Jutsu is the art of disguise and impersonations, and Snake has been known to use disguises to infiltrate enemy territory. This is most often seen during the Snake Eater mission, as he uses a disguise to pass as the enemy's most trusted ally as well as a scientist. In Metal Gear Solid 2, he impersonates a member of SEAL Team 10 and goes by the name Iroquois Pliskin to infiltrate the Big Shell. Bajutsu is horsemanship and refers to the skill of riding horses. As seen in Peace Walker and in the Phantom Pain, Snake is more than capable of skillfully riding a horse. He can even shoot from horseback as well. Suiren means water training. Specifically in ninjutsu, it's about using water for stealth purposes. So whether it's Snake infiltrating Shadow Moses underwater, or even infiltrating the Big Shell underwater without anyone noticing him, he is familiar with underwater stealth. So for purposes of this video, instead of saying Snake knows ninjutsu, we'll go along with Snake knows these distinct fighting styles which comprise ninjutsu. We briefly touched on this earlier, but Snake is a verifiable expert in every single firearm known to man. In Metal Gear Solid 4 he has access to and is able to use 70 weapons in the game. Throughout the entire series, Snake has used sniper rifles, pistols, assault rifles, submachine guns, missile launchers, grenades, mounted weapons, and several kinds of explosives. Whether it be on an unsuspecting enemy or someone as huge and intimidating as Vulcan Raven, he has single-handedly brought down towering mechanical robots and even tanks. For this reason, his skill with weapons goes far beyond that of action or combat shooting, which is what I usually attribute this skill to, and I'm instead calling him a tactical weapons expert. The reasoning behind this term is that in the military, specifically the US Marine Corps, there are levels of firearm qualification, the lowest being unqualified, next tier being marksman, followed by sharpshooter, and its highest level being expert. Considering Snake has shown an expert knowledge level in wielding every single weapon, even going so far as to critiquing people's techniques, he receives the fighting style of tactical weapons expert. And why is it a fighting style? Because he weaves it in and out of combat, and it has been crucial in stopping several of his enemies. If he's spotted and engages in combat, he will definitely switch between firing his weapon and counterattacking. Another incredibly unique skill Snake has that has served him well in combat is piloting. Not only does he pilot the small Mark II for surveillance and attacks, he's capable of piloting the very machine that has threatened the world with a nuclear catastrophe and very nearly killed him, Metal Gear Rex. This hulking beast of a machine was used to literally fight another Metal Gear in brutal giant mech combat. So in conclusion, how many fighting styles does Snake know in the Metal Gear Solid series? They are Judo, Jujutsu, Aikido, Taekwondo, Muay Thai, Karate, Boxing, Kali, Taijutsu, Intonjutsu, Kayakujutsu, Shinobi Iri, Boryaku, Chimon, Choho, Suiren, Genjutsu, Hensojutsu, Bajutsu, piloting, and tactical weapons expert. Which brings us to a grand total of 21 fighting styles. What other character would you like to see me analyze next? Let me know in the comments below, subscribe for more awesome videos, and see you next time.